Welcome to the Winning Wellness Podcast, where we explore health, wellness, performance, and try to improve not only your quantity of life, but your quality of life. I'm your host, Mitch Schwartzman.
Great episode today, almost like 2 episodes in one. We spent about the first half diving into TJ's background, his professional career, what's going on with him as a personal trainer and how he got there. And then we dive very deep into some good training techniques and strategies for getting bigger or getting leaner. So we go over reps, sets, we talk about nutrition, all the good stuff. If you've ever wondered how to bulk up or how to slim down, check it out.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Joined by TJ O'Connor, who is a personal trainer, a gym owner, a competitor in classic physique bodybuilding. I've known him. I've worked with him 10 years ago out in Phoenix, Arizona. We were working with a football team, and I've stayed in touch with him over the years and kind of watched him grow professionally. And I thought that he would make a great addition to the lineup of speakers we've had lately, and bringing in his expertise and his experience. So, TJ, thanks so much for joining us today. Would you mind getting started by kind of telling us a little bit about your background? When did you first kind of like dip your toes in the water of the weight room and kind of begin your journey down this path?
Thanks, Mitch, man. Happy to be here, brother. So, really long time ago. I started working out in the gym when I was 12. Valley Total Fitness, really awesome spot. I loved it. I hate that it went out of business. My dad started taking me at about 3:30 in the morning before school, before he did construction. And out in Arizona, it's really hot. So they started construction pretty early in the morning. So he'd wake me up, I'd throw some clothes on, we go lift, he'd drop me back off, I'd eat breakfast, maybe pass out for 25 minutes, and then catch the bus. So I did that for a couple of years with him, and then in high school. So I never stopped lifting. That's kind of what I've been, that's been one of my passions for a long time. And when I started college, I didn't really know you could make a career out of lifting, teaching, lifting, sports performance, all that stuff. So I started with like a communications degree, and then randomly was like, man, I don't want to do this. Like, this is just kind of a skill more than like a passion. So I started working on getting certifications and so on. And that's like my early 20s is when I started doing coaching.
Do you recall what certification you started out with? And now that you're, 15 years later, are there any ones that you sort of respect or appreciate more than others?
Sure. Yeah. So like my first one was the ACE certification, American Council on Exercise, personal training cert. It was super affordable then. You know what I mean? That's when they weren't like killing you with costs of certifications. And I actually liked the certification. I thought it was funny because I learned like everything about the heart, like everything about it. And they asked me one question about the heart. I was like, it's like that was aggravating. But you learn as much as you can, and then whatever they give you on the test. But I've had 7 certifications since then, and one of them was the CSCS, and obviously that one is probably the most respectable one. It's obviously the hardest one to get. And it's got like 200 questions, and there's so many variables to it. So I would say that one's probably the most difficult one that I've acquired at this point. I did like the NASM corrective exercise cert. I thought that was a decent certification for sure. But I think they all conglomerately kind of work in some way with your knowledge skill base when you're training. Doesn't matter if it's general population or performance athletes or yourself. There's something that you're going to get from every certification, but nothing that you're going to get from one that does everything.
Yeah, agreed. There's it's never a mistake to go learn something.
Yeah.
And the ACE was my first one as well. So I got that one in 2006.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I was also, my first job was at a Valley Total Fitness. So I talk to, I work in the college level, and a lot of these 18 and 20-year-olds, they've never even heard of Bally Total Fitness.
Yeah, it's
And I just think, I'm like, back in the early 90s, they were like the most dominant gym chain in America. And
Yes.
now people don't even know about them. So
That's
it's just,
business, man.
yeah.
It can go away quick.
Yeah. And I like the story about dad waking you up and getting you to the gym before the sun's even up. So
yeah, I don't even know if I've even publicly said that story, to be honest with you. So that's probably one I hear more often, but that's definitely good times for sure.
Yeah. And I'm just going to take a guess that you're still waking up pretty early to get to the gym, whether it's for you or your clients. So
yeah, early, man. Like I'm definitely not an early riser. Back then, it was just so exciting because it was with my dad, and you're young,
Yeah.
But yeah, I get up at 5:30. Clients gotta work out early, dude. That's what they do. So.
Yeah, I only had a little stint out there in Phoenix, and it's crazy how hot it gets when that sun comes up. So I can definitely appreciate wanting to get all your physical activity done before like 9 a.m.
Yeah, once you get past 9 in the summertime, man, you're hitting like the hundreds. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, nasty.
It's nice right now. It's like the 60s, but give it a month and a half, and we're struggling out here a little bit.
Man, it's tough. It's no joke out there. And then, all right, so you started training in your 20s, and then kind of where did you go from there? Any stops along the way, and how did you get where you are now? And maybe tell us a little bit more about where you are now.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of stops. So I played college football at GCC, and I was probably the strongest guy on the team. So that was always something I kind of held my hat on. I benched 435 pounds when I was 19. So that was pretty. It's a successful moment in my life of being very, very strong and just working really, really hard. And I did have a few scholarships, but didn't get any. I got a Division I scholarship offer from North Dakota State, but we make mistakes when we're kids, and I didn't have good grades. So I had to work an entire semester to bring my GPA up, and then my scholarship was gone. So I, at the end of my last year at GCC, that's when I decided I want to try and get into fitness somehow. But I wanted to go in and play college football, but my back was too messed up. I ended up having, I have pars defect in my lower back, and it was diagnosed as spondylolisthesis back then, which is like, it's almost like a separation of your lower vertebrae. It's kind of hard to explain exactly what that looks like, but if anybody knows anything about the anatomy, it's not good. So I took an entire year off, and Western New Mexico was still going to offer me a scholarship, so I was working on that, but it wasn't a good enough one for me to go and then walk on and risk my back again. So I stopped playing football, and in that moment, or in that world of time, it was probably like a year and a half, 2 years. I just lifted weights and didn't pay any attention to anything specific. I got a job as like a security officer at it's called Westgate Entertainment, and now it's humongous over there. But it was all private security, so we made pretty good money. I just lifted to get big at that time, and I got as big as I possibly could, and as strong as I could. And in that window, I then went through a moment where I had nerve damage in my right ear caused by a crash in like when I was like 12 years old or 11 years old. I got stories, bro. Riding my car on a skateboard, and then I crashed, slammed my head on the ground, had 9 lacerations to my eardrum, and I had a concussion and a skull fracture. So I had to take an entire year, not a year, but like about 9 months away from like anything. I was like hanging out in my room and like playing video games and whatever crap I was doing till everything was completely healed. I was young enough to where the body kind of transforms again.
Yeah.
Well, during that moment in time, I started having like dizziness and like feeling like I was moving when I wasn't, and I was going to sleep, and I would be like rocking in my own body, but I wasn't moving at all. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
It was terrifying. So to jump ahead, I ended up having all these different medical checks done. Tons of them, cardiologists, neurologists, MRIs, all kinds of stuff. And the only person that could find out what was going on was an ENT, and he did a bunch of different tests with goggles on and air in my ears and all kinds of stuff. And he found out I had like a 22% weakness in my right eardrum. So like the nerve was working 22% less than my left side. For whatever reason, it came about then. And the reason I tell that story is during that 9 months of not knowing what was wrong with me, I went from 219 pounds to 179 and looked like a cancer patient. You know, I mean, I was just like small and like sucked in, and just my immune system was shot because like my, you know, the way my stress levels in my brain, just everything was just not good. And at this time, I was just having a kid. Like I just had a baby. And so, well, I didn't have it, but you know, yeah. But yeah, so my daughter was born during that time, and so there was a lot going on. So luckily, I came out of that. Once I knew what was wrong with me, I was able to cope with it. And when I say cope with it, I was able to get onto physical therapy and start working on myself again, building myself back up, managing the feelings I was getting so that I could move on and know what was going on. And that's right when I started my training career. So that's when I got my first cert. And like I said, I was 24, so I was probably somewhere around 185, 190 pounds within a few months of getting back into working out. And then my normal like weight was right around 200 for a long time. And I kind of kept that for a long time. That's when I got my first job at Gold's Gym.
Yeah.
And so, you have any questions about that, or you want me to keep going?
That's a great story. We'll have to dive into that a little bit more. I think you're on a great track. I'll just add or point out that a lot of times you find people who are great practitioners or professionals with body and health and physical wellness, and they've got a story. They got something that happened to them that just rocked them. It was like a mystery thing that gave them time to just think like, man, if I could only get healthy again, I would go out and I would train, I'd take care of myself. Like if I can just get my health back. So sometimes you got to have it taken away from you so that you can just like elevate and like upgrade a little bit. So you never shared that story with me. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so you kind of get your health back, you're working at Gold's, and then just let's keep going.
Yeah, so Gold's was my first like getting, and I had worked at multiple gyms my entire life. I had worked at LA Fitness and Gold's Gym back and forth multiple times, just as like, you know, front guy attendance or cleaning up weights or whatever, since I was young.
Folding towels? Did you ever fold any towel?
Yeah. Not letting. One story real quick. I was working at LA Fitness on Greenway and 3rd Avenue, and if anybody knows this, as everybody ever listens to this, they'll know that Mike Bibby, who is like the professional basketball player, used to go in there and play all the time. And I didn't know any basketball players, and nor did I care. I was never a basketball guy, dude. And him and his whole crew comes in, and they always let him in for free, and then they play and blah, blah, blah. And I stopped their entire crew. Was like, bro, you're not coming in here and playing. I'm like, you're going to have to pay me, man, to come in here, dude. You don't just use the gym. He's like, dude, I'm a professional basketball player. And I was like, then you probably got the money to pay for a gym membership. It's so funny, dude. And then, like, somehow the general manager got scoop of it. He called me. He's like, dude, let these guys in. Anyway, that was funny.
I saw some pictures. I saw his post-career blow-up where he put on some muscle. I don't know if you've ever seen. Yeah, I'll throw up a little picture if I can find the article that I read like 10 years ago.
Nice.
But yeah, you must have inspired him. Maybe it was you who Just got him mad about the weight room.
Like this freaking young ass kid, man, not letting me in the gym, dude. I thought that was so funny, man. And they all drove up in like Lamborghinis and like I might have been Rolls Royce. I don't know. It was really nice cars.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. I was like 16. Yeah. So
you run a tight ship.
Dude, I was running a tight ship, man. That was great. But yeah, when I started at Gold's, I was like I was with some really good, I'd say some really good trainers that were there that were good to learn from. But then also, he's actually passed away since, but he was a director of fitness there. So they do mainly sales and stuff, but they hire and fire and so on. But his name was Russ, and this guy could hustle, man. Like, I mean, he would hustle all day long, selling, talking to new people, getting in meetings, blah, 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 without stopping. And so I kind of learned a little bit from him about like what it takes to like be in the gym business and do sales. Because as much as I, enjoy the actual coaching part of things, if you're going to run your own business, you need to understand sales and you need to understand hustle and setting up a schedule and administration and the entire deal, right? So with him for about 2 years, and then EOS took over. So they bought Gold's, and I was with EOS for, I don't know, 3.5, 4 years. But my first year with them, I was like the highest paid trainer with like the most sales and the most like transformations. And then there was this nutritional program called .Fit. A lot of fitness professionals will know about this because they're implemented into gyms all over the place. But you like sell supplements and different things through their program. And like I was the highest in the nation as far as sales goes. And mainly just because people trusted what I was saying. And it was true. And the supplements were good supplements. So it worked out. And then they wanted me to be the director. So now I'm taking a step into like the sales portion. And hiring and firing and getting to know people and knowing the kind of the payroll aspect of things and so on. And I denied at first because I was like, I don't want to just sell all day. And then they had a new business model or plan for that particular like job description, but it didn't actually go down that way. So I can't ever trust a corporate anything. That's why I work for myself now. But corporate anything is like, ugh. But long story short, I became the director because I wanted the skills to develop hiring and firing. I wanted to know what it was like to sell all day if I needed to. I wanted to know different personality traits and different clientele I was going to be running into with, issues dealing with trainers and so on. So my skills could develop for later when I had my own business. And so I did that for a year. And I did really well. Like that was the highest paying job I've ever had. My biggest thing there and something I want to build off of as I develop into my own gym, my own expansion of the facility and so on, is I never hired a trainer that wasn't either quality or had the ability to be very quality with some coaching and some teaching behind it. And that quality was attentiveness, being able to see when things were wrong, being able to coach different personalities, just be able to talk to a human being properly and be personable. And then had just some basic certifications of some sort or some gym experience as well. And therefore, we had the least amount of staff out of any EOS because I just wouldn't hire anybody.
Yeah.
So we only had like 6 trainers, 7 at the most, and most places had like 11 to 12. But my trainers were the highest paid trainers in the company because I would fight for them to get paid what they were worth every 6 months, no matter what. So that's always been something that's been like dear to my heart. Like I want to have a facility that people want to be in, that want to work there, that are passionate and have like the idea of like really building. But once I left the director position, I became this, it was called like and what did they call it? It was like the head trainer position, but they called it something different. And what my job was there, it was a position that was made for me at the time with this, his name was Brandon. He was like the area director for like 4 different states. And when we had a private conversation, we talked about how we could develop the training staff to just be better quality. So we wanted to kind of shotgun this position, and I would be the only one getting paid for it. And depending on how it laid out and how it developed, it might go like company wide. Cool thing is it ended up going company wide, so it worked out really well. But the pay was not what it needed to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And excuses were always something like, "Oh, well, it's a brand new program. We can't pay tons of money until it's proven." Blah blah blah. So that became very frustrating with what we were doing. And I eventually segued into my own business model.
Yeah.
Doing solo training.
Nice. And just to jump in real quick, like I hope the listeners kind of appreciate that you are, I hope they appreciate a couple of things, that you go from training and helping take care of your clients, and then you have a leadership role, and not only taking care of like some clients maybe, but you're trying to take care of your staff. So like, it's like that caregiver mentality is like, you're just trying to help people, and
Yeah.
that you're keeping the riffraff out, like not just hiring anybody who can fill out an application, maybe collect like a personal training certificate, like, not just a warm body, but to like surround yourself with quality people. And then the next thing I like that you're talking about is that they're creating positions for you. So that's something like a lot of people they'll get handcuffed by what they're told they're supposed to do or told they're allowed to do. And like, but if you have strengths and you have the ability to do a little bit more, is sometimes you can just create that position, or you can adopt those responsibilities and kind of make it your own gig. So unfortunately that didn't work out. So then you kind of shift gears and maybe realize that it's time to do your own thing. Does that lead right into Unlimited Performance, or where does that take you?
Yeah, so like Unlimited Performance is the current gym that I co-own with my. He's actually a friend of mine, but he's been in the gym business for a long time too. His name's Mark. But no, did not. So I went straight from there, and most trainers that do this are going to end up probably living the same life I did. Okay, and so this is good information to know. I went straight from there to a local gym that was called Buff Boy Athletics at the time, and now they're out of business. But yeah, Buff Boy.
I can't imagine where they went wrong.
Yeah, no, it's fun. But he was a solo owner. His name was Greg, and he was a solo owner. And he had a good facility. It was in a warehouse district, though. So in Arizona, that means it's like swamp cooler and stuff, which is not great when it's 120. But when I went over to talk to him, his mom was managing the place, and I spoke to her about like, what it would cost to go in there and become a contracted trainer or whatever, to where I could bring my own business in there and do my thing, because that's what they did over there. And anyway, it was $500 a month to rent out space at the time. And, I had 2 kids at home and a lot of stuff going on and a lot of expenses. And I was like, all right, well, can I do like half for like this month and then the following month catch up type thing? And they agreed to it, right? However, they didn't agree to it because I paid, and then 15 days later they wanted the additional money. And they're like, well, we can't just do it was half at the beginning and then half throughout the month. So you're just going to learn real quick. If you try and get a discount or something like that, people are running businesses and they're most likely not going to be able to do what you need them to do for you. So you have to figure it out. You just had to figure it out. So I had to come up with $250, pay it. And now like I look at that $250 and go, that's not a lot of money. But for me at the moment, at that time, because when I was at EOS doing what I was doing, I wasn't making the kind of money I needed to be making. And I was supporting other family members and stuff too. So that's another long story I don't want to get into because it's going to take a long time. But there's a lot of financial responsibility I had. So I figured it out, and there's a bunch of clients that all wanted to train with me personally. And, you know, there's contracted licenses and stuff like that you got to watch out for when you're with a big gym, because there's a, you know, a compete or whatever, compete, I can't remember what that's called.
A non-compete?
Non-compete license you sell or you sign and so on. And so there was no one that came to me that wasn't already done with their contract or was like a past client. But since I was on my own, so many more people wanted to come with me than pay a big gym. You know what I mean? So it took me a little while, but I built up my clientele to be pretty solid. And I did that for 3 years, 2.5 years. And then COVID hit. So everyone dealt with that. You know what I mean? Everybody had some pretty big setbacks, I'm sure. But like my personal business was different because I have, like I said, I have a special needs son at home. Well, actually, I didn't tell you this on camera, but so my son's got all these different special needs and so on, and one of them is an immunocompromised type situation, so he gets sick easier than most kids and so on. And so after a lot of arguing, I ended up having to stay home for a few weeks and not train anybody for a while, and I had to stop eating 6,000 calories because what we were we're going to get into my, you know, my bodybuilding and so on. But I was like 246 when this happened, 247. And yeah, for my body, my metabolism is pretty crazy. For me to be in that kind of weight, I was eating ridiculous amounts of food. And I couldn't really come up with a reason to keep eating that amount of food while we weren't bringing any money in, you know, for my wife and my kids at the time. So anyway, I had to drop my food. I had to not train any clients, so I was trying to do online stuff. And during this time, it was so funny. One of my old clients, we were trying to put together a golf supplement line because I'm really passionate about golfing and I know a lot about supplements. And so we were literally putting together a golf supplement line while this was going down. It was called Golfers then. And when I finally got back to training, what ended up happening is the gym owner, and this is going to segue why I got out of this as quickly as possible. The gym owner, he kept the gym open when he wasn't supposed to, which is cool. I would have done the same thing. But I wasn't able to train during those times because of my situation. And I asked him, once again, for a little bit of leniency because I had paid 10 months up front as an agreement for actually I was going to be buying into the business. And when we originally set up a contract, it was a certain contract, and then he didn't want to sign it. He was like, you know what, I can't do it for this amount of money. I just can't. I was like, well, we already agreed to it. Like, were we going to change it? And he's like, I just can't, blah, blah, blah. So our next agreement was me just paying ahead of time for a certain amount of months for the same amount of money and, you know, getting a real big discount on it type situation. But when I asked him, I was like, hey, man, like, can you extend my thing for 2 months because I wasn't able to train anybody. We weren't supposed to be here. You know my son's situation, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, nah, man, I can't do that. It's like, you know, it's just not. I mean, I was still here. You could have been here. And I'm like, okay. So it was one of those things where, you know, you never forget those type of situations when you need somebody or you know that they could do something, but they don't. Even though, you know, that business made more money in those 2 months than they ever have made because nobody was open. So they were just selling, you know, memberships and so on. But anyway, it was good for them, but it was bad for me. So I came across an opportunity where a gym owner was selling. I was doing therapy on him with this newbie machine. So if anybody, I'm a newbie therapist as well. You know what that is, Mitch?
No, please teach us a little bit.
Yeah, so it's
and I'll put a picture up so
yeah,
that
you
helps,
can put a picture up or whatever. I'll throw a photo of send you a photo of me utilizing it or whatever. But it works inside your nervous system. So it connects, you know, these pads that connect to you. Everyone calls it TENS unit pads, but it has nothing to do with that. That's an alternating current. A newbie is a direct current technology, so it goes directly into your nervous system and your body can adapt to it, and then you can use that current, right? Well, the benefit of that is the easiest way I can describe it is I had a client, the guy that owned this gym, tore his bicep deadlifting, had it reattached, so it was healed, right? And he started physical therapy, and his arm was stuck like this, right? And so his first physical therapy session, they got his arm to move like this. That's it. That's all they could do is get his hand off there. And I can send you this video if you want. But my first session with him using the newbie, I got his arm almost all the way completely to his side and all the way over here. Okay? And all it does is it retrains the nervous system to stop reacting to the injury, to the previous problem. You know what I mean? Because our nervous system protects us with pain and so on. And so that's just so great about this machine, you know, and there's tons of stuff about this machine out there, but it costs a lot of money. So it's very, very useful, but it's one of those things where it's kind of a specialty device. So he tells me that he's selling the gym, you know, during one of our sessions. It only took 3 sessions to get him to go to full range of motion too, by the way. But
okay, nice.
yeah, very cool for him. He's like, man, this is crazy. But and he wanted just a lump sum, and it was a fully built out gym, and he was a power lifter and also like a kind of a social media influencer guy. So he had a decent amount of money. He owns some clubs out in downtown Phoenix. And so he did really well financially, and this setup was solid. And I was like, I was like, how long do you have the lease for? And he's like, 5 more years. I'm like, all right. And so what do you want for it? And then he tells me. And so with my business partner, we were able to come up with this money, kind of selling a house last minute and then getting the payment and bam, you know what I mean? Like, it was pretty crazy how fast it happened. But it happened so fast and so aggressively that when I called the owner of the gym I was at, I was like, hey, I'm gone, buddy. And he's like, dude, like tomorrow is your payment for the month. And I'm like, I know, that's rough, huh? You know what I mean? Like, and I felt like an obligation to make sure I told him what happened and why it happened, and that I didn't mean to like put him in a hole. I would have let him know earlier, but it did happen very quickly. And I never put somebody out like that. I'm not looking for revenge or anything, but let's say he might have treated me a little bit differently, I probably would have paid him $500 just so that he wouldn't have felt like he lost it like that. Yeah. You know, but it is the way it is sometimes, man. When people don't treat you like you should be getting treated, or the way they would want to be treated, type thing. So, anyways, that was a really cool situation that happened so fast and so abrupt. We didn't have a name for the gym yet. We didn't have a business model. We just were like, man, we have a facility.
Yeah.
And 3 days into that, I could send you the picture of me and him, like, clasping hands, just basically saying this is ours now.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool photo. But it's kind of like a lifelong dream, you know what I'm saying, to have your own facility. Yeah, so that's where we're at now. We do one-on-one training, group training, and we have a similar business model of certain small business trainers or so on will pay us a monthly rate to come in there and train. But we do not do any memberships or anything like that, because the facility's not big enough to like house 40, 50, 60 people at a time. So yeah, we make it so that the business runs very smoothly with a good amount of people in there consistently.
Awesome. Nice. Well, congratulations on getting away from those corporations and those other people who have not helped out when they could have, and kind of getting to your own place. So yeah, that's a heck of a story you got there. But you are coaching, you're helping people reach their fitness goals, their health goals. You yourself have a pretty good track record for hitting goals, whether it's like a monster bench back in college football or just being pretty jacked.
Yeah.
I'll put some of the pictures up if you guys haven't seen the screen yet. TJ has he's got a pretty impressive physique. So when you're helping people out, whether it is like the soccer mom or the grandpa or for yourself, can you give us some like your big tips and your big piece of advice for just creating like that dream physique?
Yeah. So, that one's like a freaking loaded question, huge loaded question. I'd say the very first one is that establishing a consistency in your programming for enough time to build a foundation of muscle mass if you want a dream looking physique, because the amount of time that you train and how much muscle that you actually add to your physique will make a huge difference on the look that you create, right? So whether it's a mother of two or a teenage boy, everyone's got to put in the time to develop a good amount of muscle. And that time to develop muscle will take a few things. One will be a consistent nutrition program built around protein and carbohydrates, pretty much. Protein especially, but without a good amount of carbohydrates, your performance will lack. So there's very specific things I could get into, but most of the time you're going to need to eat 3 to 5 meals a day, and each one of those meals will have some type of protein in it. Your training will need to be intense enough to stimulate muscle growth. You know what I mean? And like, that will be definitely different for the person, like you said, like the soccer mom that might have just started working out, opposed to the college football athlete that decided, I want to try and do a physique show, because that college football athlete might have been working out in some way since he was 10, 12, 14. And that's 10 years or so, 10 years, 12 years, 8 years, something like that. So he's put in time. But has he put in time, or she put in time to put on a good level of muscle mass, or have they just been doing sport-specific training and maybe they're a little muscular or not that great? You see some NFL guys that are like ridiculous, and then you see some guys that are like, man, I'm surprised that he's that fast or whatever, because he doesn't look like much,
Yeah.
And so everyone's physique is built differently. And genetics play a role in that, obviously, with how shredded or muscular someone's going to be. But I would always, I'm not saying always, because I didn't necessarily do this, but I noticed for my own personal self, when I was in sports style of training, we would do like a full body style of training 3 days a week. Okay. I didn't get that good of results from that style of training when it comes to musculature. My results came when I started breaking up the body and overloading. And overloading meaning doing multiple sets close to failure or to failure throughout an entire workout. And then eating enough to recover from that. And eating enough is going to be based on the individual. The other aspect of that is, if you want to put on that amount of muscle, you can't be afraid to gain a little fat. So a lot of people get stuck in, they have to look a certain way all the time. So if somebody's already fat, they're probably not going to have to add as many calories, because their body's going to try and burn away a lot of that fat. Whereas if you're very skinny, you're probably going to have to add more calories and put on a little fat with the muscle that you're gaining. And so that's a real crazy question, because there's so many avenues to go down. I'd say a more specific one for, let's say, that soccer mom would be, if they're already holding a certain amount of body fat, when they first start training to build muscle and change their physique, they might not notice an incredible high or incredible jump in body weight. They might actually stay exactly the same weight for a significant period of time as their body is acclimating to training, adding fluid and electrolyte balances changing and so on, and inflammatory levels changing and so on, while they're training hard. And then all of a sudden they might have this huge jump in body weight, or drop, that's the word, huge drop in body weight. I've seen it happen hundreds of times at this point. That's the way the body is. It's crazy how it adapts. And the funny thing about that is I've been into very, very low body fat percentages. And it's exactly the same way it happens even with people that have been doing this for a long time. It's happened to me plenty of times. I'm like holding, and then all of a sudden I lose 4 or 5, 6 pounds. I'm like, holy crap, what just happened? It's just that adaptation of the diet and the consistent cardio. If you're doing cardio and your body just changing, it catches all up, and it just happens sometimes rapidly. It's very, very interesting how that happens.
Awesome. So just the simple things, right? Just hard work, consistency, a protein-based diet, training, pursue muscle. So yeah, that's one that kind of gets lost on a lot of people, is like a lot of times that teenage boy and that soccer mom, they might say they want different things, but they both need to gain muscle. They need to build that foundation, as you put it. So
definitely.
You talked about hard training to or near failure.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I think a lot of people they have a hard time conceptualizing how hard they actually need to train to change their body. Do you run into that where people they think they're done, and from your coach's eye, you're just thinking, no, you've got like 5 more reps, like we got to keep going. How do you coach people into doing those hard sets? And is there a way that you describe how hard that set is really going to feel?
Yeah. So, man, we run into this problem all the time. So it's like, it doesn't happen instantly. So most people I would need to train with for, a good 4 weeks or so, before I can really make that. And it depends on the person, right? If we got like a professional athlete coming off the street and they're like, hey, I got to go to the next level. It's like, no, you're gonna go as hard as I need you to go, period.
Yeah.
But if I got someone that's like, I want to, be Mr. Olympia, they're just going to go as hard as they're going to go. I'm going to make them, go past their limits for sure. But if someone's paying me to change their physique and they had time, they have the real time it takes to get to that level, I want to get to know them. I want to make sure we don't get them injured. I want to see what their level of stress that they can handle is to begin with. I want to see what they think hard is. I want to see what failure looks like to them. And I also want to see multiple things in their body mechanics and how they handle when things get hard. Because if you talk about a soccer mom doing a squat and it's starting to get heavy, all kinds of things can break down, right? And so I go through all that first, but I will say the thing that I would say to somebody a lot of times is, when you're in a position where you're going to the point where you're starting to feel a burn and like things are getting a little tough, and it's like, oh, this is getting heavy. I'm like, you're like just starting that set. So when you're like doing like a bench press or like a press with some dumbbells or something, and like I have a guy and I'm trying to get him to squeeze his chest and so on, and he's like, and you could tell. I mean, I could tell he's got 3-4 more reps in, but he's a kind of a giver upper type of a guy. He's kind of like, Gal, that's starting to get hard. You know what I mean? So he drops the weights. I usually say something like, there's gonna come a time when that type of set does absolutely nothing for you. So you're gonna have to wrap it around your mind that training to a level of pain, muscular pain, is going to be necessary.
I was to ask you about some success stories that you have. Does anything jump to mind?
Yeah, I mean, like as far as clientele goes.
Correct.
Yeah, I have a bunch, man. This girl Maddie, she was getting ready for her wedding, and we had gotten her pretty dang fit for a long time, but she had some personal issues before her wedding, and she couldn't train with me for like a few months and gained some weight back, and like significant, to the point where her physique started looking quite a bit different. She was never like shredded, but she was just looking nice. She was looking good. She came to me with very little workout experience of any kind. Then we had like 6 weeks to get her ready for her wedding. And I gave her a layout of what I wanted her to eat when I wanted her to eat it. And then she was working out with me 3 days a week. And it wasn't working. And she goes, TJ, I need you to tell me exactly what to eat. And I was like, all right. So I gave her exactly what I needed her to eat. And I followed up on her almost every day. And we, broke it down. And she lost like 14.5 pounds of like pure body fat in 6 weeks. And on somebody that has a good amount of muscle, that's pretty tough. It's like, it looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so she looked fantastic for her wedding. You know what I mean? She looked fantastic. Because if you see those 5-pound things of like fat, you know what I mean? You know what 15 pounds of fat looks like. It's a lot, you know what I mean, on a slender looking fit physique. So that was a really good success story. They invited me to their wedding. They shouted me out at their wedding and stuff.
Hey, yeah.
I thought that was hilarious. I had this client, Dave. He was a realtor that transferred from being a school teacher, and he became a realtor and started getting very successful and doing really well. He wasn't used to that money, I guess, or whatever. And he gained a whole lot of body fat. I'm talking he was over 315 pounds when I met him to 223. So we went from 315 to 223. And that transformation was pretty insane because he didn't even look like the guy, that he would look like before,
Yeah.
And his entire mindset and stuff had transformed by then, so that was really, really cool. Now he ended up stopping working with me because you can only learn so much for so long, and he's gained some weight back, you know what I mean? But like for that time he was with me, man, we got him to as fit as possible. He was still eating 5 meals a day. It wasn't like he was on a crash diet. Like that's never the way I do anything. All my meal planning and stuff like that is eat as much food as you possibly can eat and still keep losing body fat. So he was a really good transformation. And then there was, there's stuff like the newbie where, I work on somebody, I got a softball athlete that had a real shoulder issue, and she actually plays Division I softball, and a hip, a shoulder and a hip, right? And we got her to the point where within 2 sessions, her hips, she had zero pain in her hips. And I just changed the way she stood while she was catching because she was standing in an improper way, like in my opinion, to maintain good hip health. And then we worked with the newbie, getting her to mobilize her hips and how she came in and out of the way she moved from the normal stance, the wide stance, to when she puts her knee down, lifts her knee up, pivots, and so on. And yeah, she's had no pain since. And she was literally at the point where she said, I can't get into my stance anymore. So I've got countless things for that, countless strength accomplishments and so on. That's kind of something I'm like passionate about, is strength accomplishments.
And if you think about the Maddie and Dave who you told us about, it goes back to I asked you for tips and advice on how to improve your physique, and the first thing you talked about is consistency, and both of them slipped up on their consistency from the way you tell the story. So if it's not getting through your thick head yet, be consistent. But I am around a lot of young coaches and future coaches, and some of the students here, they are convinced they want to be personal trainers, which I encourage. But you mentioned that for a time period, you're at Golds or maybe EOS, is that your sales, you'd be like, on some months you'd be maybe the highest grossing sales or whatever it was in the company. Maybe you were doing it there, or maybe you're doing it with Unlimited Performance where you are now. Any advice on sales for maybe that young future personal trainer?
Yeah, man. So the thing about sales is like, you just, I'd say like, you just got to practice it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're just never going to get good at sales unless you sell. So there's a lot of scripts and so on that you can learn, and I'm not going to go over all those right now, but I would say you develop a relationship with somebody, you try and figure out what they really want, what they're trying to really accomplish. And then you want to be able to get that figured out for them. You want to have an emotional connection to how they are gonna get to that goal and how you're gonna help them get there. And you want to make sure you hear everything. And you gotta learn how to close. And I'm not like the best salesperson in the world, but you got to learn how to close. So you got to learn how to ask for the close. And then you also got to learn that you're going to get a lot of no's and a lot of rejection. And so it's okay to get that no and that rejection, but you got to be willing to do the same things and then get better and learn from them. When it comes to sales, for me, I was a lot better, and I'm just gonna be honest with this. I was a lot better at sales specifically when I was the director over there, because that's what I was doing all the time. So I was learning sales techniques, I was getting practice, I was putting in a lot of work. The thing about the way I train and what we do at Unlimited Performance now is that we have a reputation, and we have a trusted clientele, and we have results, people that have gotten plenty of results and promote us. And so when you get that trust factor, people come in already a step and a half in the door, ready to sign up, opposed to don't know who you are, don't know what you're having to offer, don't know anything about the trainer they're going to work with. Know it's a big corporate gym that are just trying to sell memberships or just trying to sell training and so on. You know, we're the opposite of that in every way. So it's a little bit different to get the sale. And I don't have to be salesy. You know what I'm saying? But I will say this, and this is 100% no matter what business you work in, I don't ever demonize sales anymore. I completely love sales, because if you can't sell them, you can't change their life. So it's your fault that their life doesn't change. You know what I'm saying? We're good enough at getting them to believe that you can help them change their life. So if you're going to try and be a personal trainer or a strength coach at a facility that you still sell training, because there is plenty of those, like Exos here in Arizona. Exos is an amazing facility, but you got to be able to sell there. If you want to do that, you should get your sales skills up. You know what I'm saying? Because it is super important. And if I've heard this a couple different times, but if you want a spouse, if you want to take someone home for the night, you better be good at sales, right? Like, you're selling yourself to that person. You know, if you want to get someone to give you a loan for a new business, you better be able to sell those people that are giving you that loan. That is what you're doing. And it's not something to demonize, because you need to be able to sell to be a trainer. You need to be able to sell to have a business. And you need to be able to sell your boss to give you a raise. You know, if you're in those positions I was in and you're not getting what you believe you're worth, and you're trying to convince them, you better be able to come up with some kind of reason that makes the most sense for them, you know? Yeah. So I wish I had more practical, direct advice on sales techniques, but I can't think of any right at the moment.
I think two monster, truth bombs that you dropped there were, one, you need to be, you'll hear no's and you'll get rejected, but that's where you learn a little bit, is that, so getting shut down, it's a learning process. And when I was at Bally Total Fitness, and that's my first gym, my first personal training role, that was a sweet spot, because we would get clients channeled over to us that had just signed up to the gym. They'd get like a free 30-minute workout or something like that. So you get to try them out. And then I would just go out on the floor and I would just get shut down I would just get brushed off, or somebody give me a little bit of time. And then it just wouldn't work out. So your ability to get shot down or to take no's and then keep on rolling is huge. And then second of all, you talked about, like, if you don't sell them, you can't help them. And yeah, that's huge. Like, if you really care about them, you will learn how to sell to them. not to be like the Wolf of Wall Street or like some like trickster or something like that.
Yeah.
But if that's what you're doing for work and you've got bills to pay, you need to be able to sell. So, yeah, I think those are the two big ones. Is that be ready to take no's, and sales are not evil. They're necessary. So
yeah, they're definitely necessary, especially in training, man. Especially in training, because you're actually, and just to expand on that just for a second, you're selling something that isn't concrete. You're selling a dream. You're selling a hope. You're selling a possibility. And so people don't just pick up a possibility and walk out with it. You know what I mean? It's not like getting a TV and walking out. So if you don't know them from the inside out, if you're not feeling what they're feeling, if you're not able to get connected with them and then be able to take them down this path of where you are now to where you're going to be, probably not going to get the sale. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's an emotional connection for most people, or it's a goal-oriented commitment for most people. So some people are like, well, I know this guy's going to take me here, so let's go. You know what I mean? And so you got to be able to get that to happen. And selling possibility is harder than selling a concrete item. There's no doubt about it. So it takes some skills and it takes some practice and it takes some rejection, but you can get there. You just got to keep working at it. So bodybuilding for me started at age 24. I got done playing college football and kind of was lost. And my buddy was like, dude, you got a great physique. You should do the show with me. And I didn't really want to do it, though I loved bodybuilding. I thought it was an awesome thing. It always inspired me to get bigger and stronger all the way through my youth. But, you know,
there we go. Now we got a cat video. Here come the views.
So anyways, let's just say that I did that show. It was like a Natural Westerns Classic, it was called. And I got 4th place. And that was my first experience there. I prepped myself. To be honest, I've always prepped myself. And so it was an awesome experience. I probably would have gotten 3rd in that competition if I wouldn't had tried to do all the crazy things in the last week that everybody makes the mistake trying to do when they first get started. But that also is one of the things that got me super excited about continuously doing it, because I was like, oh, I could have even been better and finished even better. And it was my first show. And that was pretty exciting. So what I ended up doing is just sleep 9 hours, wake up, eat a huge breakfast, whatever pre-workout that we were using at the time, hit the gym like maniacs 4 days a week, very Dorian Yates style training platform, and come home, eat a huge meal, prep the food for the next 4 to 5 meals that I was going to eat. Usually it's about 5 because that's 7 meals a day then. And yeah, I did a security job at the time. So I just sat down as much as I could.
Nice.
Much as I could, did the least amount possible, and ate. You know what I mean? I burned the least amount of calories I possibly could, and I just ate all day.
Yeah. Energy conservation.
Yeah, and funny story, I'll get more into the bodybuilding, but I ate and sat as much as I could, to the point where like 5 months later or something, we went for a walk with the dogs, and I got down the block and I was out of breath.
Yeah.
So like, and I wasn't even that big. I mean, I was like 218 or something like that, but I was just so deconditioned because I didn't want to move. I just wanted to gain size and do nothing else. But anyway, so the bad part about that is my bodybuilding kind of career got really hindered during that moment, because I ended up with nerve damage in my right ear, got through that, and then went back into bodybuilding. So, but I didn't compete again till, man, it took me a while to gain all that muscle back. So anybody that says like, oh, muscle memory, well, if you've lost a lot, it doesn't just bounce right back. It's still going to be a process to build that muscle back. And I got fatter than I would have liked, even though no one would have thought I was actually fat. I just got fatter. Because I was trying to get myself back to where I was. So I was eating like that. And you're metabolism is just not ready for that yet. So I was okay with getting fatter because I was like, yeah, I'm gonna bounce back eventually anyway. But it was a hell of a process. So then since then, I've competed in the Amateur Olympia twice. I got top 6 the first time I competed in the Amateur Olympia in classic physique. It was actually a really good showing. I just wasn't as full muscular as I could have been. That's a show I could have got top 3, but there's no way I would have won. Top 2 guys were fantastic. I went to the Masters. So now I'm 38 years old. I've done the Masters USAs twice. The first time I did it, I got top 2. And that was actually a pretty good experience as well. But for some reason, and I don't really know, I waited at the very top of my class, which was great. But I did have a slight film of water. I couldn't kind of get it off of me. And so that was kind of unexplainable. I'm not really sure where that was coming from. And then last year, now it would be, yeah, like late last year, I competed in the Masters USAs. Frustrated with that result. So I've taken this entire year off. And I won't compete again until probably June of 2025.
I work around like a lot of young men in the college setting.
Yeah.
A lot of times they feel like they need to gain 20 pounds. They've got a high school body, a high school boy body, and they want to have like a college man body. What kind of training are you doing to build that size, and what would you maybe recommend to a younger guy like that?
So it would depend on if the kid was weak or if they were strong, and if they had to build a lot of muscle, or if they were trying to get stronger and maintain their weight. Everybody's different, but if I was trying to get stronger, I would definitely put more emphasis on heavy loads in the 6 to 8 rep range, including my isolation. So like when I got as strong as benching 435, I was tricep pressing down the entire stack.
Yeah.
I was ball crushing 225 pounds. I was curling 155 pounds, with a straight bar.
Yeah.
So I was pressing with dumbbells overhead, 145-pound dumbbells. I was pressing barbell behind the head, 275, 285. It was about strength everywhere. It wasn't just about strength because I do bench press and then everything else is kind of easy isolation stuff. The benefit of training like that is my tendons and joints were as strong as steel. I never hurt ever. So that was cool, but I didn't go from tricep pressing down 60 pounds and then like, oh, let's try 120, let's do the stack. It was like a build.
Yeah.
Well, my mindset was always building. And I think that's the way to go, especially when you're younger, as long as you can be smart enough to progress every time and not try and say, like I said, you're benching 135 today. You're not going to bench 185 next week, but you want to try and make a progression one way or another.
Yeah. Little baby steps, right?
Yeah.
And then you do that over time and you can go pretty interesting places with it.
Yeah. And the thing is that there's a lot of, I don't know if it's a direct study cases, but there's a lot of them saying that negatives don't create any more hypertrophy. They just create more breakdown of the muscle and harder recovery process. I think that's kind of like I don't know, that's an argument on both sides, but I use negatives a lot for strength back then.
Yeah.
So I was way overloading my negative to get past what I did the week before.
Okay. So for example, you might bench press and like have somebody lift the bar up with you for a couple reps.
Yeah, to get over 405, it took me doing like 445, 455, 465 for negatives for multiple weeks on end. And I would do, just getting that much weight in your hands is a scary thing for most people that have never done it. So you can't just be like, well, I'm benching 350. I want to go for 405. The 405 will just plant you into the ground, into the bench, because you just never held it in your hands. So the negatives I would work on, I'd say every other week back then. And I'd have somebody spot me and I'd come down 4 to 5 seconds and then we would pop it up together. But they would yank it up and I would do the same thing. It would be 3 to 5 reps
I'd almost
Yeah.
always be in the 4 rep range.
What when you you mentioned doing 3 to 4 sets, 2 of those sets would be to burnout.
Yeah, it would be all out failure. So like
Yeah.
especially when I was younger. Now I still go past failure sometimes now,
Yeah.
depending on the movement, but it would be literally like I can't move the weight anymore on my own and somebody's helping me do it.
Yeah.
With control.
What about how many exercises are you doing per day? If
Yeah,
it's a
so back then especially, I didn't work out more than 4 days a week.
yeah.
And this goes to the kid that is like me, that cannot gain weight. Okay, that takes, it seems like they eat everything in sight and they stay skinny. So I was kind of that way. I felt like I had to eat everything and I'd gain an ounce. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if I worked out more than 4 days a week, it was like I was burning more than I was actually progressing in.
Yeah.
And so I would work out 4 days a week. That was probably my best in the middle split of ever. Like I could always make more progress at 4 days, not as much at 3 and not as much at 5. 5 as I got more advanced, so because I needed more volume and I could learn how to eat more food and get more calories in and work on my rest and all those things. But when I was younger, I didn't know all that stuff. So 4 days a week, I would train every body part once. But obviously, when you do like a bench press and an incline press and a chest, fly and a shoulder or like a dumbbell press, you're going to get some crossover into the shoulders. But I definitely did more specifically. I did somewhere around 10 to 15 sets on like my chest pressing movements. I did I say 4 to 5 exercises on back, 3 to 4 exercises on shoulders, about 6 exercises on legs. And then, like it's hard to say exactly what I did back then because I don't have it like templated, but it's pretty in my head. But also, I did some pretty crazy stuff back then. I'll give you an example. So, like hack squat, for example, I would do something like, it would be my maybe second movement after leg press. And leg press, we would do all the way up to like 20 something plates on there, 26 plates, I don't know, 1,000, 1,300 pounds or something stupid, right? Trying to be like Ronnie Coleman, and then only doing like 4 or 6 reps.
Yeah.
Just getting as much load on my legs as I possibly could and just letting it bury me to my chest. And then, just going all out, trying to just murder the weights. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now my legs grew, but it's not the only thing I did. We went from there and then went to hack squat. And hack squat, we'd have 6, 7 45s on it. And we wouldn't just do a set. We do 4 sets with 745s, sets of like 12 to 15. So it would be like, instead of going all out failure that day, we would just do all of our sets in a row. So I've built up this. That was a little bit after my young time. That was probably when I was about 27, 28. I built up this resistance to volume to the point where I could go. It was a lot of weight, dude. I get somebody that joined my workout and they'd be throwing up on workout, like the second workout. You know what I mean? They'd be like leg press. Then we were doing a little bit more volume. So 12, 15, 20 reps. Then we go to hack squat. We're like finishing our second set in hack squat, and he's throwing up in the corner. Yeah. Awesome. I loved it. But it's just because if you weren't used to that level of training, heavyweight and volume, it was going to be tough. So you got to build up to it. But those were like some pretty crazy times because we learned how to, or we were able to adapt to taking so much stress, good and bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want to take the least amount of stress with the most amount of like progress. So
but
you got to be able to push it, but you also got to be able to recover.
You probably baby stepped into that maniac style of training though.
It was for sure.
For the upper body lifts, you mentioned that you kind of do 3 or 4 exercises per muscle group. And then on the legs, you said more like 6. With legs, is that like maybe like 3 more push dominant and 3 pull dominant?
Yeah, so like back then it was a bit different because we wanted to try and hit everything. You know what I mean? Especially when you're younger and you recover really quickly. Like obviously I've adapted to what I can do now in comparison to then. But like then it wouldn't have been pull dominant specifically like with hamstrings alone, but I would always pick one hamstring movement to do, at least one calf movement to do.
Yeah.
Then it would be 2 multi-joint movements that were extremely tough, whether it was squat, like barbell squat or front squat, leg press, and then either hack squat or like there was another squat machine there with the pads. You sat your feet on the platform and it kind of sat you back into the position. So it's supposed to be safer for the knees. I don't remember what the hell it's called. At least at that Gold's Gym I was at.
Is that a like a pendulum squat?
No, they didn't have those yet.
Okay.
But it was more like you sat into it, not it sat you forward. Like we have a pendulum squat at my gym now, and it's awesome. It's money, but like if they had that back then, I would have used the crap out of it.
Yeah.
But then it would be like a seated leg curl or a single leg curl, and then finish with leg extensions. Almost every single time was like that.
Yeah.
And I'd say 9 times out of 10 we would do a lunge as well. So I mean, you're talking a lot of movements. Yeah, I don't know. Did I say 6? I thought I said 9, but like it was like, it's like somewhere around 6 to 9 movements. It was a lot of movements, and your isolation shit can be just as intense depending on how hard you do it. But nowadays that's not what I do.
So you do all that and then go work security.
Yeah, exactly. Then you just go sit around, eat as much as you can, do absolutely nothing. You know what I mean? Butter, eat a lot of food.
Nice.
Keep your stress down. Be a bodybuilder.
So you've talked about recovering each day, whether it was like staying low key in the security job, things like that. How about your training? You mentioned doing negatives every other week. Did you put deloads into your training, or was it just baby stepping forward again and again and again? Or did deloads happen naturally?
Yeah, that's a good question, because when I think about when I was my absolute strongest, it was right before I started my last year. I got to move this cat. My last year before college football, that's when I benched 435.
Yeah.
I never felt like I needed a deload because something was always coming up. Yeah. So, that's the thing I think people get a little bit too confused about, is they're like, oh, I got to plan my deload. Well, then you go on vacation, or then you're like out sick, or then you're, then you're like with your girlfriend doing a snowboarding trip, and then, you don't work out for 4 days straight, or it's like, what the hell are you deloading for? You just took all these days off, or you got one lift in, then you took 3 days off for whatever it might be. Maybe you had to go to a class trip, especially when you're younger. And then you get one good lift in again, and then your mom needs you to go do something. Like there's all these things. So there was really no reason, at least back then, that I needed a deload, that I could specifically remember. Now, when I got to specifically working on bodybuilding, and like every single day was built to train, I definitely put in weeks where we were like, all right, let's go about 75%. And we're going to just kind of go through the motions, relearn the technique, start feeling the muscle again, start feeling like we can move better again, work on stretching and mobility and recovery, and like let our immune systems bounce back and so on. But see, then that only lasted 2 times, because that's when I had the nerve damage and all that stuff kind of popped in and completely interrupted all my progress and everything I had done. So that is definitely something I always recommend. But then when I train people, they'll be like, oh, I'm going to be out for this much time because I got to go do this. And it's like, there's no point deload. You're just going to be taking a day or 4 days off or 7 days off or 10 days off. You'll recover just fine.
Yeah. Yeah. You can either plan deloads or deloads will happen for you.
Yeah. It almost,
whether you get sick or hurt, those deloads
you
are
want to try and get it to where like you didn't cause the issue. You know what I mean? Like you didn't train so hard, overbearing, overreaching for too long to where you caused yourself to get sick or something like that. You could have avoided it. But that's the name of the game, dude. I mean, I'm still in that world right now. Like I want to overreach to the point where I'm just barely on the edge, and then I take a week off and let my body recoup. But then you're exposing yourself to a lower immune system sometimes and fatigue and so on. But that's how you make progress. You know, you don't do it every single time, but you build up to it and then take some time off.
I think probably my last question about the minutia, the sets and the reps. If you're training for a handful of weeks in a row and you're trying to do the baby stepping, is that first week, is that in your head, is that like, I'm going to train at like 85 or 90% today? Or do you change your percentage of effort? Or do you train hard and then change your rep schemes? Or are you repeating rep schemes and just competing against the previous week?
Yeah, I've always had a proponent on competing against the previous week. Especially like, let's say, like, I'm going to give you an example of where I am currently, because now I'm the smartest I've ever been with this. And I also know how to feel what's going on in my body the most. So let's say that I start a new plan, and that plan is for me to do 9 total sets on chest the very first week. Okay. So I'm focused on 9 sets. I'm still going to go as hard as I can on every movement, but that hard might be quite different because I'm just kind of relearning the movement pattern. I just came off of a week break, or a week of deloading. So my body's a little bit more sensitive to the training. I'm definitely not going to go past failure on anything. I'm going to just go up to failure or right on the edge of failure with like maybe RPE 1. So like just leaving 1 in reserve. Which I really never leave more than 1 in reserve most of the time, unless it's like maybe a chest fly of some sort or something like that, where, you know, the risk of injury could be high if you're really pushing it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I always compete with myself. But what I do now is the next week, I would try and beat those numbers with the exact level of technique. Okay. And then the following week, I would add a set to one of my main movements. So now I'm increasing my volume, but increasing my volume by a set of the same movement. So I can focus specifically on getting better at that movement. And it's usually like, my example would be like another incline bench, because the upper chest development is the hardest thing to develop pretty much for most guys. And so I would increase my sets on my incline. Because I would be able to focus more on that particular muscle, and my body could adapt to that because I had been already doing it, and now I could add some volume. And then let's say my whole plan for that entire thing is 8 weeks. I would continue to do that every 2 weeks. I would add an additional set. So by the end of it, I'm maybe doing 16 total sets on my chest, maybe 17. And at that point, I'm pretty freaking destroyed.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, okay, I need a week off.
So you talk about feeling the muscle, and I think it's easier to feel muscle if you put like a little bit of a pace or a tempo on your reps.
Yeah.
How do you describe the speed of your reps?
So currently, I never did this when I was younger, and probably why I was extremely strong, by the way. I used the stretch shortening reflex like a boss when I was younger. Okay.
Yeah.
There was no pausing, stopping. That thing was right up. I'm talking like lightning.
Just let Jesus take the wheel. Just drop
like
that bar in the chest.
Boom. You know what I mean? Off my chest hard. But nowadays I pause, and I pause probably a good count, maybe a count and a half on my chest. And part reason of that is I have extremely long arms. Like I have a very long wingspan. And I've had a hard time getting to my chest, you know, most of my days with bench press and so on. You know, shoulder issues and all kinds of stuff. So like it's actually been a very conscious effort to learn to get my body to adapt to a deep stretch in the pec and shoulder, not only for longevity, but mainly for development, to be honest, but for longevity has an aspect to it. Once again, that's starting lower and then increasing your weight slowly. 10% battery now, Mitch. Let's get it. So like my goal now is to pause basically as long as I can to the point where I feel the fibers actually opening, and then I drive from there. So I take it down about a 3 count, 2 count, pause 1, 2, fire about 3/4. Like my fire off my chest is probably like, I don't know, a half, and then bang, because I don't want to bounce it out of the bottom at all. Like I do not want to feel tendon. I want to feel muscle. So I squeeze hard out of the bottom. So it's a pretty good like 1 up, but it's almost like a slow raise into an explosion.
And
so I can grab that muscle and go.
And what was the eccentric tempo? What are you doing on the way down?
2 to 3.
Oh, okay. Okay.
2 to 3 count. So I'm trying to feel that muscle, but it'll depend on how much my chest is engaging. Because sometimes if I go too slow from the top, I feel too much tricep engagement. And when you're trying to get into the pecs, you need to make sure you're allowing that stretch to happen. So I might go a little faster at the top and then slow down the negative as I'm getting closer to my chest. Because like barbell, you're not, you're in a fixed position. So you're trying to feel. So it's all of them. It would be decline bench. It would be incline bench. It's flat bench. They're all the same. With dumbbells, you can get the chest to engage quicker. So I could go slower from the top. But like usually I go a little bit more slow from that mid. So it's like faster to the mid and then slower mid down. Yeah. When I really hit that pec.
Nice. Okay, so you're training your butt off, training hard. You're making the new guys puke it in the corner. When you're recovering and you're eating to grow, what are some of you could talk about your go-to meals or just some of the things you believe in or that you advise to people who are trying to bulk up?
Yeah, well, so because of you saying you have young guys as a lot of your, like, who watches your channel, I'm going to say what I did when I was in college playing football first, and then I'll tell you what I do now to make it easier. So when I was in college playing football, I did this. I had very little money, and so, I worked as a gym attendant. And so, yeah, I don't even know what that was. Like, it might have been like $7.50 or $8 an hour back then. So I don't know what that equates to now, but pretty much minimum wage. And I would buy all my food at the same time, but it was as basic as it gets. I would try and eat a pound of pasta a day. I would try and drink a gallon of milk a day. Nowadays, people don't like that, but I drank milk like a maniac.
Yeah.
I would try and eat a pound of beef a day. Okay. And then I would try and eat a dozen eggs a day. Now, people will say that's pretty hardcore. Now, eggs were not as expensive as they are now. So that stuck. But back then it was quite more affordable to get eggs. Nowadays, you might have a hard time with that diet because of the eggs and the beef cost. But it's a hell of a lot cheaper than going and buying it, going into like, P.F. Chang's or freaking, I don't know, wherever else you want to go eat, even Chick-fil-A, stuff like that as your diet. But I'll say this, I ate that every single day. I started the diet trying to grow. I played middle linebacker in college. So one of my coaches says, TJ, you need to get bigger. Just do it. One way or another. I don't care how you do it. Just freaking figure it out, right? I'm like, what the hell? So like you're trying to figure it out on your own. If I would have went to like Alabama, I'm sure they would have been able to help me more. But at the time I was at GCC, and even though we're the #1 team in the nation for JUCO, they still didn't have all the resources. So I did that. Now, anytime I was hungry and I couldn't force down any more pasta or beef, I would eat McDonald's. Now, don't go eat McDonald's, please. I haven't ate McDonald's for like 18 years, okay? I hate that place. But hopefully they don't like sue me or something like that. But I don't like McDonald's at all. But so now I would substitute for that, like In-N-Out or something. I would say is probably a better quality food. And then I would do some kind of burrito. But like then I would do McDonald's, I would do Panda Express, or I would do KFC. And KFC had these huge bowls that were like mashed potatoes, chicken, corn, random just crap. I don't even know. It's all in a bowl. And so I would eat one of those every day too. So I would eat all that food and one of those every single day. And I got up to like 219. So I started the diet at 199 and I got to 219 in a summer.
Yeah.
Now I held all that weight through the entire football season till probably the last few games, and I dropped down to about 207. And then we played in the championship game, and it gave us almost 3 weeks off, and I got up to about 212 for that championship game. So it's not like it was bullshit weight. It wasn't all fat or anything. I trained hard as hell, just like I've said this, and then I ate my brains out.
That's a good solid diet. That's I'm looking forward to your bulking on a budget video.
Yeah, that's basically what it was, man. It was crazy. And so nowadays, if I was going to say, okay, I need somebody to bulk, I would say something like, you still need the beef 100%. I think beef is like it's going to be in your diet no matter what, especially for like a young person. This is very age specific, okay? And the reason I say that is because if I have an athlete that just needs to get bigger, I'm going to tell him get like, 75-25 beef or 80-20 beef. It's not that big of a deal. You need all that fat. It's not like you're going to cause cardiovascular issues, when you're 17, 18, 19, 20. If you need to get bigger, you need to get bigger. And the fats are going to help with that a ton. I would tell them to go get a good olive oil or avocado oil, and I would have them sprinkle that on every single meal. Okay, the fats are going to just help the meat stick to your body and grow faster. You're just getting more calories, but they're healthy fats. You know what I mean? They're still fats, but they're going to be better fats your body can utilize better. I would get a good omega-3 fatty acid because you're going to need it for inflammation. I would work on the carbs that are the easiest for you to digest, whether it's white rice, pastas, white potatoes, and a lot of it. And I would be eating them on, especially every training day. I would be trying to get, if you're a 200-pound person, try and get 400 to 700 grams of carbs in your body every day. If you're a 150-pound youngster, you're trying to get 250 to 500 grams of carbs every day. And you're trying to see how much weight you're gaining. If you're gaining 5 pounds a week, you're probably getting quite fat, right? So then you're going to have to back off, right? If you're gaining, 1 pound a week, I'd be like, let's go, because it's probably about half and half, or a quarter fat, or a quarter muscle, 3/4 fat, depending on what your training age is. If you're very early in training, you're probably gaining more muscle mass. If you're very late to training, like you've been training for years, then you're not going to listen to this video anyway. You're not, and you're thinking, well, I'm not going to eat that much food. Well, of course not. You would be in a way, you're going to be in too much of a calorie surplus. You're going to want to only be in a 250 calorie surplus or something like that. But you got to make it as simple as possible as a young person, because if you make it too complicated, you're not going to stick with it, and it's going to be very overwhelming. I would eat as much eggs as I possibly could get down. Like I said, I ate a dozen a day. And by the way, the biggest I've ever been is 248, and I was eating a dozen a day. And I was 35, 34 when I was at that weight. So it just works. You know what I mean? And what works, works. So obviously, if you get a better quality egg, it's better for you, right? You get higher omega-3 eggs, a lot less GMO corn eating eggs, and so on. Great. But if you're a young person, can only afford so much, you get regular eggs and do with it what you can.
For sure.
I'd say the simplest, the better. And then I was going to say this too. Even when I was bulking as a young person, I ate bunches and bunches of spinach. So I would go and get 2 or 3 of those big bags of spinach, and I didn't steam it or do any of that. Like, I was eating whole chickens. Okay. When I was going to the security place, I would get a whole chicken every day. And while I was there, I would mow the whole thing down.
Yeah.
Okay? Both breasts, both legs, both wings or legs, and they're in drumsticks. They're in my mouth. They're gone by the end of the day.
What was the crime rate around there? Because it sounds like the security guard was pretty busy.
Yeah, it was actually pretty low. You know, if I needed to be around, I would, but like I was eating. It was so funny. All the times I'm like driving around in a dumb golf cart and I have like a chicken right next to me. And they're like, dude, what are you doing? You can't do that. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll put it away. No problem. I never put it away. I was always eating. Always.
Yeah.
But
you gotta eat to grow. Yeah.
Especially back then, especially when you're younger. You can't just get fat. That's stupid, especially if you want to bodybuild. But I knew my metabolism. I had already, by the time I was 23, been training since I was 11. So, like, you have to know where you are and where you're going. You can't be like, well, this guy just said he ate a whole chicken every day and he ate 12 eggs and he ate a dozen. It's like, yeah, I had already been training for 10 years in some kind of way, whether it was football style training, explosive work, bodybuilding style training, hypertrophy work, whatever it was. I was working out with weights for that long. And so if you're just starting out, your body can only handle so much. If you're naturally a fat kid, you're going to have to eat less food. If you're naturally a very skinny kid, you're going to eat more food. That's just the way it goes.
What about when we fattened up too much, or if we're maybe that woman who's like getting ready for a wedding and we just want to get leaner? What do you do for training, whether it's lifting or cardio? What do you do for training for fat loss? And then maybe we'll talk about and then touch on the diet as you please.
Yeah. So the training, it won't change too much. Here's what changes. So I might increase the pace between sets. So maybe a little bit less rest. So like, let's say somebody's doing a squat workout and they normally are resting 3 minutes because, you know, they're at their 95% of like a set of 10 or something like that, or 12. You know, I might increase that pace to be like, okay, you're only going to rest 2 minutes. We're going to try and stay as close to that weight as we can. Or we're going to stop. We're going to still keep that same weight because we're trying to keep as much muscle on as possible. But we might end up going and doing a superset with hamstring curls and then come back because we're trying to keep the heart rate up slightly more, but also increase or decrease the amount of time it takes to get everything in, while still trying to maintain as much muscle. So the hard thing about, like, the funniest thing about training to lose body fat is that the misconception is that everything changes. And it's like, well, not a whole lot changes. Most of the time you want to do as much intensifier sets and so on, like drop sets, rest pause sets, failure plus failure sets, you know, like different cluster sets, all that stuff. You want to try and do as much of that while you're bulking as you can because your body can recover from it. A lot of people do it when they're dieting because they're like, oh, I got to increase my intensity. It's like, well, actually, you got less calories, you got less time sleeping, you got less nutrients going in your body. Probably should be doing less of that stuff because you're not going to recover nearly as well, including your nervous system. But the thing about getting leaner is your conditioning goes up significantly because your body weight starts coming down. So one of the benefits of that is that you can do faster things. So I like to start going like, okay, like as we start dropping body weight, we could speed up some of the stuff we're doing, because you're naturally going to be able to do it. You could just move faster because your heart's not having to work as hard. Your conditioning is going better. Your blood's flowing easier. You know what I mean? You're not carrying around as much weight. So I like to speed up things sometimes. Not all the time, but I would say for the most part, I'm going to do more supersets, most likely more compound sets where I'm doing like a chest press right into a chest fly, or a fly right into a push-up, something like that. Or a leg extension right into a lunge. Something to intensify it by keeping the pace up, but also trying to blast the muscle in a way that still stimulates it to grow, but keeps your heart rate moving. So there's that. It's not like that's not the only thing I would do, but I like those ideas. And then I would say the other big thing is your main goal after you've built muscle is to keep it. So you don't want to be like, well, now I'm doing light weights. Absolutely not. If you've been squatting 300 pounds for 6 reps, you want to stay as close to squatting 300 pounds for 6 reps as you possibly can. So I will try and keep their strength as high up as possible. Like I have a client that's competing in April, and he's going to do a physique competition, and I need to make sure his chest stays as big as possible. The last thing I'm going to do is have him benching, 70% of what he could do. Nope. He's going to stay at as high a percentage as possible, as close up to that show as I can, under safe conditions, because I need to make sure he keeps as much muscle as I can. So your strength is a determining factor usually of how much muscle you're maintaining or so on. And then if you're actually lean, like you're lowering your body fat to the point where you're starting to see abs and stuff like that, that's when I would maybe adjust volume more significantly. So people that tend to, this is bodybuilding specific, since this is kind of the avenue you're going in. I'll use myself as an example. My chest has always been something that has a harder time growing. You can tell I've talked about chest a lot. So when my chest is at its biggest is when it's full, I have a lot of food in me and so on. But when I start dieting hard, my muscles that I lose would be, or they tend to shrink, we'll call it, would be like my chest and my hamstrings. So areas of trial and tribulations for me are those two areas. So what I would do is I back off the volume a little bit on those days. Because what you want to do is you want to stimulate that muscle as strong as possible to stay there and then recover. You don't want to beat it to death and then it can't recover and you just break down muscle in that area because of the deficit that you're in and your body starts pulling from that area. You want to just stimulate it enough and get out of there. Whereas then there's other people that can blast their legs all the way through a hard diet to where their volume is crazy high and their legs stay there. But other people, if you know anything about bodybuilding, they do too much stair step or too much bike, too much, mainly it's the step mill that most people mess this up, but too much anything fatigue on the legs, and it's like their legs just dwindle away. They're huge in the off season, and then they somehow just get shrinking in contest prep. That's from too much cardio or just too much volume on the leg. It becomes too fatigued and it goes away pretty much.
And how much cardio should someone getting leaner focus on? Is that, it seems like every time people want to get leaner, they ditch the weights and they spend more time on the treadmill or step mill.
Yeah, once again, I think that's a massive mistake. So what got you the muscle is what's going to keep you the muscle. So you want to maintain your training and your intensity for as long as you possibly can, regardless of how lean you get. But you're also going to need to lose body fat one way or another, whether it's through increase of activity level or decrease in food consumption, so calorie intake. Or you do something like you increase your metabolic rate by taking fat burners and stimulants or other things like hormones and stuff like that increase your metabolic rate, your nutrient uptake, and so on. But if we're talking about the average person here, you're saying you're going to have to start doing something. And I would rather not take away so much food and increase activity. So the very first thing I would do with somebody is say, I need you to start taking 10-minute walks after every one of your meals. If they're not already doing that. My clients, I already tell them to do it. It doesn't mean they listen. You know what I mean? I wish they all did because they'd all be lean and shredded. But my contest prep people, they listen. So then I'm already got them doing 10-minute walks. So I can't go like, okay, do a 15-minute walk. What I would do is be like, okay, so now we have to start increasing your activity one way or another. So usually it's, like for my guys, I would say I want some 2 to 4 times a week of 30 minutes on the treadmill, walking at like a 7 to 10 incline, at like a 2.7 to 3.2. We start at one number and then we see how it goes. If they're losing body fat and they're staying full, like they're not completely flattening out, turning into string beans. And I'm not saying they're losing muscle by doing that. If you're listening to what bodybuilding is, I'm talking about you're burning away too much carbohydrate and your muscles are starting to get too slim looking. They're not filled up and looking full. Then we'll keep it going. You know what I mean? Okay, stay on that plan. Let's go 2 more weeks, or let's go 1 more week. And then we'll see if the results stay. But usually there's like, okay, we're starting to stagnate a bit. We're going to have to increase that. Let's just still stick with the 3 days or 4 days, but let's go 40 minutes. I've tried the 5-minute jumps. It really doesn't deem better results. I mean, at least I've noticed that in the past. It has to be like a 10-minute clip of like increase of time. And then I've noticed a better response from people. 5-minute increases would be like the genetic freak. You know what I mean? You're like, don't do more than 5 minutes. You're going to just dwindle away. You know what I mean? And there is genetic freaks out there like that get very lean. I hardly have to do cardio. I'm lucky to that point. I've built my metabolism up to be very strong and I stay very lean year round, which also makes it way harder for me to gain weight. But like there's all those genetic differences. My gym partner, he has to do way more cardio. He has more of like that endomorph, mesomorph body style. And so his cardio is pretty much 7 days a week, when he's getting ready for a contest, 7 days a week, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour, depending on where he's at. Now he's gotten leaner year round and built more muscle and he has to do less cardio. So everybody's different. If you're starting from a larger or like a higher body fat percentage, I always start with less. You want as least amount that you could put out as possible so that you could see the results happening at a slower pace. And then I would say diet breaks might be something that you would want to do. So instead of dieting hard and doing tons of cardio for 20 weeks or 30 weeks or the whole year, so depending on the person, your metabolism will respond to that cardio. So you don't want to have to keep increasing it. You don't want to be doing 2 hours of cardio a day. And plus you'll build some crazy fatigue up, and the crazy fatigue will make you feel like you won't want to do anything else. So if you normally are like, oh, you're like happy with your kids and you're moving around, you're doing all these cool things, but then all this fatigue sets in, you're just going to want to sit on the couch. You're going to want to just watch TV and not do anything. And then now your non-exercise, the heck is it called? Your NEAT, your non-exercise thermogenesis is depleted. So you're burning less calories, just not moving at all. So I'd say every about 6 to 8 weeks of dieting and cardio, I like to try and take 3 to 5 days of eating at maintenance and lowering the cardio and then going back to it. Kind of resets the metabolism, and you get back to work. I reset the metabolism, but then I start right back where their cardio was because they've adapted to that. So since their metabolism will get kind of reset, I kind of let these people do this on their own sometimes. Like one of my physique client, he just went to a get together with friends out in Texas. I'm like, dude, just be smart, but eat as you want to. Try and break it up to 4 meals a day. Make your last, I was like, try and make your last meal your smallest. Try and make your first meal your biggest. And I was like, drink a lot of water, and I let him kind of just self-regulate. I was like, don't diet, just self-regulate. And he came back, 4 pounds bigger. And within 4 days, 5 days, he was back down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And his metabolism reset, feels better. And we're 2 weeks after that, he looks fuller, harder, more veiny, bigger, like all good things. So because of that, it's just like a deload. It's like a reset. It's a reset for the body, the system, the metabolism, digestive tract, your mind. You know, dieting is a mind game. And so if you are like so strict, great, kudos to you, because not a lot of people can do that. But on top of that, you want to allow yourself some time to kind of regenerate and then come back to it. And so I like doing that quite a bit with people. So increase cardio all the way up to doing 7 days a week if you need to. But I like to start as low as possible. And then I also, with my clients, instead of doing just steady state all the time, as long as they're not building too much fatigue, I will have them do at least one interval session a week, sometimes two. So a great example of that would be like an Airdyne bike, and I would have them do 2-minute warm up on the Airdyne bike, and I would have them do somewhere around, I would say 8 to 12 sessions of 8 to 10 second bouts of all out. And I usually start somebody out with a minute break. So they'll go 8 to 10 seconds and then a minute of just kind of just pedaling very slowly, and then all out again, and then a 2-minute cool down. That would be where they would start.
Yeah.
But it depends on how many days a week they're training with weights.
I spend a good amount of time on Airdyne bikes or assault bikes. And I notice I'm guessing a workout like that, the first set or two, or rep or two, pardon me, the first rep or two, they probably think Coach TJ is like soft, and then and then on that like 10th or 12th rep, they're just like hating life.
Yeah, it's way hard, especially it's effort too, right? Intent behind it. Like if you do what it takes to get a response for interval or high intensity interval training, you are going to be going hard, and your heart rate just skyrockets. And hopefully that minute gives you enough time to get it back down, and then you'll do it all over again. But it's a real challenge, but it also brings on fatigue. So it always depends on how much the person is doing in the gym, in cardio, and outside of the gym. So it's kind of person specific. But if I was given a generalization, I would say 1 to 2 sessions of something like that. It could be the elliptical too. I like non-impact movements and things that allow you to really go hard. Like I'm not going to have anybody that wants to be on stage or, Sarah that's 45 go do all out sprints on the treadmill or outside when they're dieting. If we had built this person up when they're off season to do sprints and their hamstrings are good and they're adapted, maybe. But as they get leaner and leaner, a hamstring tear or a calf tear or something like that becomes way more likely. So it's just smarter and a little bit more safe to be on a non-impact item. And then you can go as hard as you want and you're less likely to have any kind of injuries from it.
And then what do we do with the diet? Are we just reducing everything, or how do you manipulate your macros?
So here's the big thing about with my clientele. So I actually give my clients an option. I will either write down everything that they're eating for the day, and I'll just remove things as they go through their plan based on how they look, or I'll give them a macro count, and then I'll tell them, hey, I need you to remove, or this is what your macros are, go for it. And I give them a list of the foods that they can choose. And I usually do this based on how their body responds to the foods. So it doesn't matter what diet they choose. If they eat white rice and they float like a balloon, I'm like, hey, you're not eating white rice. Period. I don't care if you like it. It's just not working for your body. Why were we inflaming it for no reason? So I always find out what the body's doing for the food. And you could easily figure that out for yourself. When you eat foods, you just eat single food items like chicken and rice or steak and potato. And if you notice that you feel terrible after you eat it within an hour or 2 hours, or instantly, it's like, all right, maybe one of these is not what I need to be taking in. But what I like to do is I keep the protein pretty much the same. I'm a little bit different than, say, maybe all coaches. I actually lower people's protein a little bit when they're bulking. So, like, if a 200-pound man is bulking, I have them at a gram, maybe a gram of protein per body weight. Maybe 210 or 215 grams. And that's not low, but most people that are bulking are probably eating more like 1.25 to 1.5. They think the protein is what's going to make them gain muscle, so they're just going to keep eating more of it. I think it's going to definitely help you gain muscle, but the overabundance of protein is just going to get you more full and increase acid in your stomach and make it harder to eat more food. So, like, you definitely need the protein because you're not going to gain muscle without it, but you just need enough protein to gain muscle. So I like 1 gram per pound or just over that. And then quite a bit more carbohydrates or quite a bit more fats, depending on the person. And then if the person is digesting protein really well and eating a lot of carbs, if they're eating 1,000 grams of carbs, you can't just keep more carbs in there, right? That's stupid. But I would increase the fats and then I would increase the protein. But like when someone's dieting, I have their protein a bit higher because we want to increase satiety. So I'm at about 1 point. So if the person is 200 pounds, I'm going to have them at like 250 grams of protein, 275 grams. And then I keep their carbs as high as I could keep them for as long as I could keep them. Everybody's different. Females tend to be very carb sensitive, so they can't eat as many carbohydrates as men can. And so therefore, a lot of females I train are a little bit higher fat and a little bit lower carbohydrate straight from the get-go, right? But if I have a female that is eating 200 grams of carbs, you gotta subtract something. And so I usually start with subtracting their fats down to where I feel like their minimum would be to keep them healthy hormone wise. And then that's only because I want to keep their energy level up and their muscles full. And then if they're losing, I'm going to keep them there as long as I can. And then I'll start subtracting carbs. And then I don't do that necessarily every day. Most people I carb cycle with. And the reason I do that is because, well, when you're sitting on your butt all day or you're at your desk, typing away, the hell do you need carbs for? So like I will go sometimes 0 carbs, only fibrous carbohydrates from vegetables, and then maybe berries on the days they're not training. And then I'll go moderate carbs on the days they're training their body parts that are good, and sometimes very high carbs on the days that their body parts suck. So if I have a female competitor, I need their lower body to look very nice. I'm going to have their carbs high on their glutes and quads days or whatever it is, lower body day number 1 or number 2, or if they only can handle one day, then it's going to be on that day for sure. And then I would carb cycle off of that. So I like carb cycling because it keeps a little bit of this going on in your metabolism. And it's also like your pancreas isn't just getting murdered with all the high carbs all the time. So you're like getting these stimulations of high carbs and your body could suck them all in and do something with it. And then when you're not using them, your body's running off fats and you get proficient at both. And the thing is like, if you can run your energy systems can run off of fats and carbohydrates, man, you're less likely to get fat again. So like you want to be good at both if you can be. And so I tend to lower carbohydrates, but I try and cycle them. So I try and still keep a high day, a moderate day, a low day, or completely off carbohydrates. And I just play around with that depending on the person and how they're losing or not losing.
Before we close, this is the Winning Wellness Podcast. And in that, I really mean 2 different things. One is that when people are not well, they have to strive to and compete to get their wellness back. And then on the other hand, if they're an athlete and they're physically fit and they're able to compete, we want them to win well. When you think about winning your wellness, any tips for us that you haven't shared already? What do people need to do that they're not doing?
Oh man, it seems like in this day and age, it's got to be like a mental thing because a lot of people are like definitely struggling with like mental health and
being distracted by so many different variables out there in the world. And I'd say they're going to have to get their diet figured out one way or another, because that's super, super important. But most people aren't prioritizing sleep. They're not prioritizing getting to bed at the same time every night. Instead of they're prioritizing their wake up time. So I would say the one thing that everyone has to do 100% of the time is prioritize their sleep, which means setting a sleep time to get started. Going to bed, always going to bed at that time, one way or another, somehow, some way, regardless of how busy you are, regardless of what you got going on, because it is almost an impossibility to be a healthier human being or a assertive human being or someone that's competent or someone that can take care of their kids better or whatever without getting a proper amount of deep, restful sleep every night. And when you're going to bed at infrequent times on a regular basis, including weekends, partiers, and everybody that wants to go out all the time, you are going to make it very difficult to become restful and energetic. Therefore, that will affect all aspects of your life, okay? Your mental health for sure, but obviously your heart, your resting heart rate, your digestion, your gut microbiome, so many different variables that are going to make your immune system feel or be downregulated, and you'll probably get sick more often. And there's just so many bad things when you're not resting. So get to sleep at the same time every night. You'll be a healthier, more well person for sure.
I love it. That's a big one. Set an alarm to go to bed, people. TJ, thank you for all the advice and the stories and the expertise today. If listeners wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so the easiest way to get a hold of me really is probably through my Instagram. I'm very active on my Instagram. It's just at TJ O'Connor with an OR at the end. But I'm also tjo'connor53@gmail.com if they want to direct email me for like coaching or something. But if you DM me on Instagram, that's fine as well.
Thank you so much for listening to our Winning Wellness podcast. If you have any questions or suggestions for podcast guests or topics, you can submit those through YouTube comments. You can message me on Instagram. My handle is Mitch Schwartzman, or you can email me at coachmitchschwartzman@gmail.com.